Hi, I'm Connie Whitman, your host, and you're listening to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. Thanks so much for joining us this week. So my motivational quote today is by Ronald Reagan, and he says, "Peace is not absent of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means." Well, if Reagan's quote is true, why does it feel like everybody around us is angry and in a constant state of conflict with someone or something? Now, have you ever been involved in some form of conflict, whether at work or at home? Of course, we all have, right? How did you handle it? With anger and aggression, or with kindness, active listening, and care? Is it even possible to handle conflict in a productive and positive way? After all, there's conflict. Would you be interested in learning how to create productive conflict? I know I would, so sign me up. Well, today my guest, of course, she's going to have some answers for us. Her name is Cheryl Ellis, and Cheryl and I are going to discuss conflict and literally how to navigate it so you can achieve benefits for you and your teams. Now, Cheryl is the deliberate leadership expert and culture coach, CEO of Ellis Business Enterprise, and is the author of Becoming Deliberate, Changing the Game of Leadership from the Inside Out. Now, she's a certified high-performance coach and founding member of the John Maxwell's team of coaches. She's trainer and speakers and certified facilitator for 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. Everything DISC, one of my favorites, Productive Conflict, which is our topic today, and PXT Select. Now, Cheryl specializes in helping growth-minded business owners and executives build cohesive, performing teams. We all need that. Please help me welcome my wonderful friend and guest, Cheryl, to the show. So thanks for being on, Cheryl.
Oh, Connie, it's my pleasure. You know, I always have such a good time visiting with you, and we always have such rich discussions that just kind of fly by. So this is a big topic, and let's get into it.
It's a huge topic. So you and I haven't spoken in a while, and the reason we connected again is because I noticed that you're writing about workplace conflict, and I was seeing it a lot through emails and our correspondence. What prompted your interest in this it's not a new concept, but in conflict?
Yeah, you know, it seemed like more and more of my work was leading in the direction of helping teams that were at war with each other, I guess is the best way to describe it. There was a lot of conflict. It was unhealthy conflict. It was creating a toxic environment. And somebody would ask me to come in and see if I could help. And I definitely can help. So that was kind of one part. The other thing that was going on was I noticed that with all of my one-to-one private clients, that more and more of our discussions had to do with helping them navigate a particular conflict that they were having at work. So it might be something with their team members. It might be something with a coworker, or it might even be a way to interact with their boss. If they just didn't feel like they were connecting with their boss in the way that they wanted to, or they weren't getting the kind of feedback they wanted or the kind of recognition they wanted, and they just wanted to know, how do I broach this subject? How do I fix this? You know, it's very uncomfortable to be in this situation and not know what to do about it. So I found that just more and more of what I was surrounded with was this idea of there's so much workplace conflict. Let's help people learn how to manage it more effectively.
And it's interesting because what you were describing, I think most of the people listening, Cheryl, are thinking conflict, bam, right? It's this big brouhaha that builds up, and it's this, aggravated, raising voices, which isn't always the case. Conflict could be a heck of a lot more subtle. So what are some of the common sources of conflict that you're seeing among, again, your clients, your teams that you're coaching, and other members, that you work with?
Yeah, in a big way, I think the basis of unproductive conflict is some type of a lack of trust. So a lot of times you have to go back and help build a bridge of some kind of trust between individuals. But like you said, sometimes it could be something that someone gets, something sets you off, like hits your hot button, and you explode. And other times it's that kind of slow simmer that takes place over a period of time, and then all of a sudden, you can't take it anymore, and you blow. So conflict takes so many different forms, and it comes from so many different areas. I mean, let's face it, when we're at work, we all have different priorities, we have different goals, we have different styles of how we communicate and how we handle things. We have, different priorities in the way that in our values and things like that. And just there's a lot of difference at play when you're at work. And now we even have, this overlay of so many virtual work environments where it's even difficult to communicate with each other on an even keel, on an even sense, because we're relying so much on email and text messaging, and so we miss so much nuance in tone and things like that a lot of times you think, oh, this person's mad at me, when they're just probably in a hurry. And we misinterpret a lot of what goes on. So there's just a lot of dynamics around this issue of conflict, especially in the workplace. But as we both know, what happens in the workplace often carries over into the home life as well. So, people are really struggling with this. I see it so much.
Well, think about it. People are dealing with conflict at home, whether it's with a spouse, a kid, a parent, a sibling. That washes over or flows over into our work life as well. It's not like we're separate people. So that conflict can really affect all aspects. It's funny because I know you're certified in DISC and I'm certified in DISC, and that's one component of how we communicate. But oftentimes I say there's so many layers. We have 4 generations, right, working side by side. We communicate differently. Male and female, we communicate differently. Where you were raised, the environment, whether it was a city, another country, or a farm. We see and respond to stimuli differently. So when we talk to humans, there's so much going on at the core, because we all have these filters, right, depending on what our background and experiences are. So conflict is really important. This is such an important topic today. And then I'm going to ask another question. But the other thing too, Cheryl, is we're angry. Everybody in our world is angry. The media hype, it's triggering on anger and not resolving issues. So we're in this, I feel like we're just in a constant state of conflict, especially in the United States. I'm not sure about other countries, but I know in the US, it feels like there's conflict everywhere. So how do you go about helping businesses or people, right? You coach individuals as leaders as well. Is there a process or something that you follow that helps, help them kind of follow along?
Sure. Well, when it comes to a team, and actually when it comes to individuals for that matter,
yeah,
I like to start with an assessment. And I have some great tools that I use. One is a team-based assessment that helps me understand what's going on with the team, and what is it a lack of trust? Is it just that we don't know how to have healthy conflict with each other? We don't know how to disagree and stay human, or is it because we just have never been taught how to do that? We think that all conflict is bad, and therefore we try to avoid it, or that there's the people who just try to really they gravitate toward conflict. They revel in it. They enjoy it. And so if you have someone who really enjoys it and someone who is totally conflict avoidant, and those two people are having a disagreement, it can get pretty ugly pretty fast. And it descends into destructive types of behavior. So I like to start out with an assessment. So I have a tool for teams, and I also have a tool for individuals. For individuals, it really helps you understand how you typically respond in a conflict situation and what makes you respond that way. So we all have natural tendencies in our responses to conflict. And some of those tendencies are healthy and constructive, and some of those are really destructive. I think of things like passive aggression, or gossiping, or stonewalling. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that when you're in a conflict situation, it can get ugly fast. But there's also some really productive ways that we handle conflict, like becoming a better listener, really trying to understand the other person, making sure that there's a dialogue and not a one-way conversation. So by starting with a measurement of, how do you typically respond and why do you respond that way, you can help people identify that, become aware of it, and then change the behavior. Because as we both know from our work with DISC and other tools like it, behavior is not hard to change once you become aware of it. It's the easiest thing to change. You could just change. You could stop and think about how do I really want to handle this situation? And you can choose to behave differently than your natural reaction.
Yeah, and I agree. Once you know something, right, you can't unknow it. You could choose not to act on it, but you know it. So I think people have aha moments thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't even realize I responded that way, or I didn't even realize I had that thought, right? Because we're just in our life, kind of humming along. Do you often find people who go, yeah, they all have to deal with me? So do you get the people who say, too bad, I'm the leader, I'm the boss, get in line?
Yeah, I haven't really encountered too much of that. I think that it does exist for sure. I think there's a lot of people who tend to lead that way. It's kind of my way or the highway. But I think there's greater and greater awareness that people have different needs and different values and different ways that they communicate and different styles. And so I think most, leaders and managers have some sense, or it's easy to show them that there is a better way, that there's a more effective way to get done what they want to get done. So what I normally find in the workshops that I do for productive conflict is that once people become aware of the ways they typically respond, it does create a bit of an aha moment. And, and especially when I give them a list of the types of behaviors and I say, okay, pick the ones that most bother you when other people do it. And then pick the ones that you're most likely to act on. And that's another aha moment, because people go, wow, it really annoys me when people belittle me, or it really annoys me when people gossip about other people. And then on the other hand, I might resort to sarcasm, and I realize that bothers other people. So there's an awareness that happens that says, okay, I can choose a different way to respond. And I might not choose that, but if I'm trying to be more effective as a leader, as a manager, as a coworker, this is another option. This is another way to go. So, and most people, if they're interested in learning about productive conflict, if they come to a workshop, if they take an assessment, if they brought me into an organization, it's because they want to improve in some way. They want to be more effective. So most people are pretty open, and once they have their eyes open to what typically happens, why it typically happens, and then what I can do about it, they make a commitment to make some changes. So it's really nice to see that happen.
Yeah, and it's practice. I think you could teach someone the tool, but then as different events or different conflicting situations arise, you can really start to practice that muscle memory. Hopefully conflict doesn't happen that often, but it happens, I think, more than we often think. And I love the phraseology, productive conflict. Everybody, I think, when people, I hope the listeners are thinking conflict, what could be productive? Conflict, I think, is a nice opportunity to look and think, something's not quite right. How can we make it better, right? So that becomes the productive conflict. But conflict isn't always a bad thing. It can create change, or it can, the name of the show, right? Enlightenment of change. But it could create change, and I think it can create growth for the people who are involved in whatever that conflict looks like. Does conflict get easier? And maybe a two-part question. Does it get easier, and how can they use the tools over and over and over again? Because, again, conflicting situations can vary, right?
It definitely can get easier, because like anything else, once you have awareness, that's a big step. But then, like you said, it takes practice. And one of the things I really enjoy doing with teams in particular is not only helping them understand the benefits of conflict, and there are many, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but also how to have productive conflict. In other words, how to have an exchange that is, where you and I can disagree, and we're doing that with the intent that we're going to come out with a better solution in the long run. The facts are that teams who can have constructive conflict with each other, who aren't afraid of conflict, who engage in healthy conflict, they're actually able to get better solutions to their problems.
Sure.
They're more creative. They're more innovative.
Sure.
And once you have that level of trust as a foundation, you can engage in conflict and be free to disagree with a recognition that, if we bring in these differences of opinion, we're going to end up in a better place. So I'm a big believer in helping teams learn how to engage in constructive, productive, healthy conflict, because I think there's so many benefits to it.
Can you tell us some of the benefits as you build these teams and address that core conflict that might be going on?
Sure. I think, for one thing, with conflict, you have better solutions. You're more creative and innovative in addressing problems. And ultimately, I think you build stronger relationships because, that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. When you are able to have, you think about your relationships, whether they're personal relationships or work relationships. When you are able to weather a difference of opinion and kind of go at it, with somebody, just talk it through or whatever, you always emerge from that conversation with a better bond, a stronger bond. So the basis of a stronger relationship. And I think, certainly with couples, this is true. Sometimes you have a knockdown, drag out fight, but at the end of it, you've cleared the air and we're on the same page. So at least we know, I know where you stand, you know where I stand, and we either agree to disagree or we figure out a way to have a win-win for each of us. And so I think that the chances of doing that with a healthy conflict style, just increase your ability to build strong, healthy relationships with your coworkers or with anyone for that matter.
It's interesting, and I want to talk about personal conflict in a minute, but my husband and I, our disc styles are completely opposite, which is good. It's that balance, right? He pulls me down because my energy's so high, and I encourage him to move forward, right? It's okay, take the risk. So that balance, we have this beautiful balance, but we communicate very differently. So if there's a situation where I'm hurt or he's hurt, we respond to that conflict opposite. So, early on, because I've been using DISC for 30 something years, I remember we first got married, and because our styles are so different, but I was educated in it, I thought, I'm going to kill him. We're not going to last because I moved so fast and he was so slow. And to be around someone like that every day that you love, I thought, wow, we got to get on the same page. So I taught him DISC, which is really kind of cool. So to this day, when I get fatigued, my D, and again, people could look up DISC if they want more information, but when I'm fatigued, my D gets much higher and amplified because my I and D, they're in conflict. They're very high and close to each other. And he'll say to me, I see your D, I'd like to see your I. And Cheryl, I laugh when he says it because he calls me out in such a respectful manner. And I go, you're right. This is really what I wanted to say. And it diffuses this whole, because he knows I'm tired and it wasn't meant to hurt him or coming from an adversarial position. I'm tired. So, it amplifies. It has helped us. It has helped our marriage. And I'll tell you, January will be 27 years. But he and I, because we're so different, I'll say to him, I need 24 hours because I can rip him apart because I fire so fast and he can't fire as fast as me. Highly intelligent, we're just wired differently. So give me the 24 hours, and he does the same. We write down our thoughts, and then now you're diffused. It's 24 hours later, you're in a much calmer place. And then I say, here's why I felt bad, or here's what you do that drives me crazy. And then we either come to agree to disagree, or, oh my goodness, I didn't even know that. I didn't think about that. Right. Oh, code word. I'll work on that. So all of a sudden you have harmony where there was, I'm going to kill him or I'm going to kill her. So you can use these tools in a personal realm as well. Do you find that when you work with teams that there's this secondary component that all of a sudden they're coming to you and say, holy crap, this is helping me with my sister or my mom? Or are you finding that kind of dynamic, the dual dynamic?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that I always point out, if it doesn't come up, is, these are skills that you're developing. This is an awareness you're developing. And these skills in managing conflict more effectively can help you at home as much as they help you at work. So for example, if you're trying to get your teenager to do something that that he or she doesn't want to do, these are tools that can help you with that. If you're in a disagreement with your spouse and you don't like the way he or she is reacting to your disagreement, there are some other options here. And so there's definitely a carryover. As a matter of fact, I think about this time of the year when people are together with their families, sometimes an awful lot. And for a lot of people, that's great. And, love being with my family, love spending time together, nice meals, having fun, whatever holiday traditions we might have. But let's face it, most of us have at least, someone in our family that tends to get on our nerves, that knows how to push our buttons, that maybe does that on purpose. And so, there's also a lot of conflict in family situations, and especially around the holidays, because people are a little tense to begin with. There's a lot going on, we feel a little overwhelmed. Yeah. We're trying to get everything done and all that kind of stuff. So that just kind of adds to it. Just like you were saying earlier, Connie, when you're under stress, you become like yourself, only more so. So if you're exhausted, if you're a little bit overwhelmed with how much you have to get done, or you're running under a deadline, your worst qualities tend to get amplified. And that's true in a conflict situation, and it's true in everyday life. So again, having tools like this to help just help you understand better, the types of responses you could have, it just gives you another choice. In other words, you may not choose to behave in a productive way, but at least it's a choice, and you know what it is, and you know how to do it. So yeah, definitely. There's a big carryover to the personal side, and almost every time I teach this in either a group or individual setting, people recognize that right away. They're like, "Wow, I need to use this at home, or I need to use this with my friend, or I need to use this with my mother." Whatever the case is.
It's interesting, and I think when we talk about the conflict, all of these things, when you start going through and describing behaviors, whatever those behaviors are, people start saying, that's my husband, that's my mother, that's my friend. I think we relate it more to our personal lives first. And then we're like, oh yeah, my boss does that. Or, oh yeah, that other division head does the same thing. But I think we could, because your family, at the core, we hopefully each other well, the flaws and all, right? We are who we are. But I think that people can relate on the personal side. So that's cool that, you get that double whammy of help, which, for me, if we could teach something that helps at work, awesome. But if it can help us in our personal lives, that to me is like cha-ching. It's a win for everybody, right? Which is wonderful. Do you have a personal or professional biggest conflict resolution that you use frequently, or that pushes your buttons?
Oh, for me, yeah. You know what? I realized that I have one of the tools that I use actually measures like what your hot buttons are.
Yeah.
And I realized certain behaviors tend to irritate me more or annoy me more than others. Like, for example, when people get into over analysis. They start taking things apart. They kind of overdo it, because I'm more of an intuitive kind of person. So I see something and it makes sense, and I just do it, or I go there, or I buy it, whatever decision there is. And then there's other people that just they just kind of overanalyze everything. And my sister's a person like that. She's going to buy a washing machine, and she researches every possible aspect of a washing machine that you can imagine. And I'm like, okay, that one looks good. So, and I know that, I accept that in her because I love her and she's my sister, and it's actually part of her charm. But that thing where people just kind of overanalyze a situation, I realize is one of my hot buttons. And I have other ones like that too, but that's one of the things that bothers me. And so I'm being aware of it. I catch myself. So I say, oh, I'm just being annoyed because the person's, analyzing stuff, and, he or she just needs to do that because that's who they are. And so I can accept it and not get, not get pressured or not feel stressed about it or not feel angry or annoyed or irritated about it.
And I'm cracking up because that's one of my hot buttons. People that get caught in the weeds, I'm
Yeah,
like,
oh yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, please stop. Like, please stop talking. And I think, I don't care. That is so much, that's like so much information that I don't need, but they need it. And but you're right, by understanding that, they need it. They have to go and do it. Otherwise they can't pull the trigger. Where I'm like you, yeah, that one looks good. I like the way that sounds. Let's buy that. Where my husband will read Consumer Report and do a whole bunch of deep dive and read. The other thing too is people are like, well, did you read the reviews, Cheryl? I go, oh no, I didn't. I read the description. It sounded good to me. Oh no, you should read the reviews. So then I'm like, that makes sense. I'll read 3 reviews. I'm like, yeah, it's good. I read the highest and the lowest, and I think the reality is somewhere in the middle, right? And they're like, you only read 3 reviews? I'm like, yeah, I read a high, low, and somewhere in the middle. You know that the truth is somewhere in that realm. They're like, oh no, I read 50. I read all 100. I'm like, you're out of your mind. Who's got the time for that? Because my mind is, I'm on to the next thing. So it's true. You have to, but they need that. You have to allow that, because then they're going to feel like they made a mistake, and then buyer's remorse or whatever. It's really funny how humans interact with humans. I love it. It's such a charge, right? To learn about how people are so different. So if someone is struggling with conflict, and let's say it's in their workplace and maybe in their personal life, doesn't matter. How can you help them specifically, and what could someone do to get more information? Like, do you have tools? I hope people are intrigued by this conversation, Cheryl, because I think conflict is everywhere. So how can you help them? What tools do you have?
Yeah, I like to say, conflict is inevitable, and it doesn't have to be painful and destructive. That's kind of the byline here. I've put together a whole bunch of tools to help people with this. And so to start with, I can offer to your listeners this little guide that I wrote about conflict. And it just helps you understand at a very high level what some of the typical approaches to handling conflict are that you might choose. And it also talks a little bit about the different ways that we tend to respond to conflict and why we do that. And I can give you a website where people can download that little guide. And when they do that, they're going to get some other tools too. They're going to be followed up with some other, like a video that explains a little bit more, and a little ebook that explains a little bit more. So the more you want to know, the more you can learn. And they're all free resources. And then at one point, if people really would like to understand more about their own response to conflict, I have made available you can order the assessment tool that I use, one of the assessment tools that I use, and learn about your own style. So that's not free, but that's, in the meantime, you're going to learn a whole lot more. And if you still want to know more, you can get that assessment tool. And so that's what I've laid out for people that want to learn more about conflict, because it's kind of one of those things that the more you learn, it's almost the more you want to know, because you really, wow, I just never realized that I might respond differently than somebody else, or what they do annoys me, and it's just the way they respond. They're not doing it to annoy me.
Yeah, and I think that, I hope as people are listening, they're thinking, what are my hot buttons? And, you and I know some of our hot buttons, but we've been doing this for a really long time. We all have hot buttons. And as soon as you understand your personal hot buttons, you're able to kind of stop and go, that was my hot button. Take a breath, and then even just think about what the next step is. And I do have the link, Cheryl, you sent it to me, the free link for everybody to get that basic information. And I think it goes to your website so they could find the other free tools, the video, and all of those things, which are super, super helpful. So, I feel like this was a great discussion, but we hit the tip of the iceberg. So these other free tools, I think, are wonderful to help people do a little bit deeper of a dive, even if it's just for their own self-reflection. I think it's very helpful. So that thank you for offering that to my listeners. I think that's awesome. Before we go, is there one tip that seems to be your go-to, like right out of the gate with people? Is there one thing that you use over and over and over again?
It is, and you actually touched on it earlier, and I will use this word. It's what I call the pause. And what I mean by that is, when you're in a conflict situation, just the idea to stop and be thoughtful, be deliberate. Ask yourself, what do I want the outcome of this situation to be? And give yourself some time. So depending on how hot you are, it may be just a deep breath before you respond. It may be a walk around the block. It may be, like you said earlier with your husband, 24-hour rule. I need to sleep on it. So it's that idea that before I send the nasty email, let me just sleep on it and maybe send it tomorrow. And tomorrow I look at it and I say, oh, I can do a better version of what I want to get across. So I just broadly call that the pause. And sometimes it's very brief and sometimes it's more lengthy depending on how serious the situation is. But just that, taking the time to really stop and think about, what do I want to have happen here, and what's the best way for me to get that? And so the pause is my go-to. That's really my go-to because it works in so many situations.
Yeah, no matter what the conflict or situation is, that breath. Well, also, when you take that deep breath, it provides oxygen to the brain. You're able to think a little bit more clearly than just boom, going at it and responding, that knee-jerk reaction, which could be very dangerous. Because then it amplifies. Sometimes it amplifies, which isn't what we wanted to do. But now it's like a tornado, and you can't pull it back in. And you just said something I just want to also comment on. I mentioned it at the beginning. Cheryl's book, Becoming Deliberate, Changing the Game of Leadership from the Inside Out. Wonderful read. We met a few years ago, and that book was amazing. I loved it, and it's a quick read, but also Cheryl is all about how-tos, which I love. That, me too. If you want to learn something, I'm going to not only give you the information, I'm going to teach you how to do it, like the pause. So your book is all about how-tos. Christmas is coming up, just saying. So it would be really cool to maybe buy, especially if you have a new graduate or someone who just got promoted into a leadership position and had never been, or someone who has been in a leadership position where we gain bad habits over time and don't even realize it. So the book is also another cool thing, another great resource, inexpensive. So Becoming Deliberate, Changing the Game of Leadership from the Inside Out. So Cheryl is all about giving good advice at these wonderful prices, free for my listeners. How special are we? And then again, the book, great Christmas gift. Cheryl, thank you for being on and sharing a really important topic. I especially think because we just live in this angry world, and when you're coming from a place of anger, there's nothing productive about that conflict. It just becomes an accelerated conflict where no good is ever going to come from it. So thank you so much for sharing your tips and the pause and all those things. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Connie. It's always so much fun to chat with you about any topic. We've covered so many different topics over the years. And
We have all relevant, Cheryl, all relevant. So yeah, that's good. And you guys, my partner and I are still offering our free communication style assessment. Goes beautifully with our topic today. Again, another free resource at wisdomdecoded.com, my other business. And it's right on the landing page. Take it. It gives you insight as to how you communicate, but how people see you or respond, kind of like what Cheryl and I were talking today. So yet another free resource for you guys. Cheryl's website, if you want to do that, is Cheryl Bonini Ellis. So it's Cheryl, Cheryl, B like boy, ONINIELLIS And I will trust me, I will put that on the Web Talk Radio Enlightenment of Change website. You can also reach Cheryl directly if you have some specific questions at her email, which is cheryl@ellisbusinessenterprises.com. And the free link, I'm not going to read it on the air. I will post that so you guys could get the free resources as well. So Cheryl, thank you so much for being on. Always a pleasure. We always have so much fun and we have so much to talk about.
We do, Connie. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Always a pleasure. Anytime. Yeah, keep rocking it, Cheryl. Keep rocking it. I hope
you do the same.
Yes, thank you. I hope you guys will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together that no matter what change is going on in your life, I've got you. My guests, we have you guys. We have so many resources that we're making available to you. I hope that you're using them so that you could become your greatest, most wonderful self. So you've been listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.net. I wish everyone a wonderful, inspired, and conflict-free week. Thanks, everybody.